You say you want love, you consciously do, but somehow you always end up in the same relationship dynamics, the same patterns. Somehow you stay alone. The reason might be your self-concept. Today we will explore how your self-concept might be blocking you from receiving the love that you so deeply desire, and what you can do about it. Hello my loves, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Lorena, I'm a somatic self-concept and identity coach, and I support you in bridging the gap between who you currently are or perceive yourself to be and who you desire to be or become, so that you can break repetitive cycles and finally step into the reality that you were always meant to experience. There are some really common relationship patterns that I see in women in this community. So women who come to work with me or women who just feel drawn to my content. And that's often things like attracting emotionally unavailable people, getting into almost relationships where it almost happens, having flings but never anything long-lasting, never getting commitment, consistently being cheated on or lied to. So painful. Been there. Never connecting with anyone or finding anyone attractive. And even really specific things like dating for exactly 3 months and then being broken up with or being ghosted or some other super specific time frame or pattern. Let me know if any of these resonate with you too, or if you maybe have a different pattern that keeps repeating in your life and your relationships. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to cheer you on. I'd love to support you in breaking it if you feel ready to dive deeper. But also, I think it's really, really powerful to just share and be witnessed in that. And it can feel really reassuring and validating to see, hey, I'm not alone in this. Other people experience this too. So I'd love to see some support in the comments. And I want to tell you directly, whatever you're experiencing, you are really not alone in this. I've been there. So many women are there. So many of my clients used to be there. There's nothing wrong with you because you're experiencing repetitive patterns, or you can't seem to get into this epic love relationship that you desire. But whatever pattern keeps repeating for you, whatever pattern you get caught up in, you can break it. I promise you, you can break it. But before we can dive into that idea of breaking a pattern, before we can even attempt to break it, we need to figure out why it's even showing up in the first place. Now, when it comes to always ending up in the same relationship dynamics, there are some quite broad reasons for why this happens. It might be your self-concept, which means that you are associating your identity with being caught up in that pattern. So you have taken on, you have embodied, consciously or not, the self-concept of being the person who always experiences this pattern. It might be that you feel a lack of safety in receiving love. So receiving doesn't feel safe to you, even when you think it's what you want. Similarly, you might have unresolved trauma. Things that happened to you in childhood or in past relationships that left a wound, that left a mark, that created a shock in your system, that created a sense of bracing for impact in your nervous system, in your state of being. And that needs to be healed and integrated so that you can move on from it and create something new. It could also be beliefs of not being worthy, of not being chosen, of not being lovable. So there's a worthiness element, which is, to be honest, also connected to your self-concept. All of these really are. But it can be frustrating, right? If you have this conscious desire for love, but you still feel blocked. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about having a conscious desire for love and an unconscious desire for maybe something else. Because honestly, answer this question for me. Are you asking for love, but maybe there's a possibility that deep down, you're actually terrified it might come, or it might stay, or it might leave? You say you want it, but unconsciously, you probably don't. Your conscious mind does want love. You're right. I believe you. Your conscious mind wants an epic relationship. Your heart wants an epic relationship. But what your unconscious mind wants is to be safe. It wants to be comfortable. It wants to be in and with what's familiar, what's known. It wants to keep up the status quo because it's predictable. Basically, no matter how much you say that you want a healthy, committed, expansive love, parts of you may protect you from experiencing it. They don't do this to harm you or to keep you from what you want. They're not being mean to you. They are just trying to keep you safe. Now, let me call you out on this one. You always choose your reality. That's sometimes a harsh thing to hear, and it can create resistance, and there can be moments where you wake up and you're like, hold on, I didn't choose this. I didn't want this to happen, but there's truth to it. When I shared this with one of my clients once, it was such a wake-up call for her. In the beginning of Recreate Yourself, what we always do is we dive into the unconscious states that you find yourself in. The things that you're not aware of, triggers and patterns that you maybe don't even know about because they're so subtle or so unconscious, maybe even desires that you've suppressed. And we really dismantle it, right? And what often comes through is the difference between what you authentically desire and what you think you desire, but what is really just a representation of something else, of a deeper desire. So when we moved through this process, this particular client started realizing that she had unconsciously pushed love away her entire life. And she would push it away before it could even fully begin. She would push relationships away before they could even take off. So how that played out in her reality was that after a few months of dating, the people she was with would never be sure, never be certain, never be ready to commit, and eventually they would just leave. It was always the same pattern, and while she was complaining about the pattern, she was choosing this exact experience unconsciously. But she was complaining about it as if it had been coming from somewhere outside of her. The patterns that you keep experiencing come from somewhere inside of you. Now, that's not to say that it's your fault. That's not to say that no one else has to play a part or any responsibility or a role to play in what is unfolding. But if you keep experiencing the same things again and again, the common denominator is you. So with my client, we did some really deep work on her subconscious. And I teach this in a very specific way in my coaching program, Recreate Yourself. You can have a look at the process that we move through inside. It's all linked below. But we incorporate the nervous system, the somatic experience. That's how we access the subconscious in the first place. And basically, we got this client to a place where her subconscious and her nervous system began to feel really safe with love and really receptive. And guess what? Just a couple months of her being in Recreate Yourself, she called in a committed relationship. The person she'd been dating, that she'd been anxious about up until this point, they were now all in. But here's the thing. This had been available to her the entire time. She just wasn't open to it, at least not on a subconscious or unconscious level. So whatever you are currently experiencing is something that on some level you are available for. So that's why it's mirrored back to you. If you keep calling in emotionally unavailable people, some part of you is not available either. If you keep experiencing the same patterns again and again, then there is a part of you that pushes love away no matter how much you say you want it. And for those of you who really want to liberate themselves from attachment to past relationships, attachment to the pain from the past, attachment to an old identity, then I invite you to check out my free masterclass, Liberate, because it's exactly about that. You can get the replay below because we don't have to stay attached to the past. We don't have to stay attached to the patterns we've been experiencing, even if you've never had a different experience ever. And if you keep experiencing the same stuff, or you feel anxious or uncomfortable, if someone actually shows up for you, and you may even feel uncomfortable or anxious when you connect to your desire, when you imagine it, because that's when you might also have some triggers arise in your subconscious, that's how you know there's maybe a part of you that doesn't feel safe to receive. Now, how is this unconscious rejection of love even created? We dove into this a little bit, but I want to go deeper here. It largely comes from wounding, right? It largely comes from wounding that's often created in childhood, that's often based on attachment wounding. Sometimes it's so far back that you don't even remember, but that's not a problem. If you don't remember, we can still heal it. We can still shift it. But when you walk around with a wound, an abandonment wound, a rejection wound, a neglect wound, which many of us do, right? Those are very common wounds. Your subconscious will protect you from experiencing that again. But by doing that, it actually keeps the wound alive. Similarly, it might be trauma from past relationships. So I feel this is important to say too, because not all wounds are created in childhood. Some wounds are created in adult relationships. If you've been cheated on, if you've been in an abusive relationship, if you've gone through a divorce, even if it was amicable, if you've been rejected or broken up with one too many times, or you've never had a relationship and you wonder what the hell is wrong with you, which, by the way, the answer is absolutely nothing is wrong with you, that's all trauma. That's all wounding. So it doesn't always have to come from your childhood, but the result is the same. Your subconscious braces, your nervous system braces, and it wants to protect you. It's also created through stories. So those are meanings that you assign to past experiences. And we often do this in childhood because as children, we can't make sense of things unless we connect it to ourselves. But you do it in any moment. Something happens, right? An event happens, and unconsciously, you make it mean something. And often you make it mean something about you, about what you can or can't have, who you can or can't be. Once you realize that your current patterns are chosen by your subconscious, the game gets to change. And then you need to learn how to work with your subconscious. That's the real art, rather than against it. That's so that the wounds can heal, the protection can dissolve, and the patterns can finally break. And working with your subconscious is actually really hard. Creating that safety in your nervous system requires so much more of you than just doing practices and taking deep breaths. That's all part of it, but you need a really safe container. You need to feel safe in your body. You need to get your subconscious on board with where you want to move to, with the future that you want to create, with the relationship that you're calling in. That is a really challenging part, and that requires you to have the process to actually integrate these emotions, work through these fears that come up, know how to access your subconscious, to have the right support to hold you through it as well, because otherwise you're not going to feel safe even going in. But all that requires you to actually become a new version of yourself. It requires you to detach from the identity or the version of yourself that was available for these patterns. You need to become the person that's not available for these patterns any longer. You need to become the person that's ready and available for love, that is excited to receive it, that feels safe to receive love. And you can shift your self-concept in a way that you call in completely new experiences. I have done this. I used to call in non-committal people all the time. That's not my experience anymore because I'm not available for it. I also used to have a wall up for a really long time. Strong boundaries, but sometimes boundaries that are more like a brick wall. That wall has come down. Well, for the most part, still working through that one sometimes. But bringing that wall down was scary as hell because then I had to become soft. Then I had to open. I had to be vulnerable. I had to expose myself emotionally, obviously. But I've shifted it, and so has my experience of relationships. And with that has my reality. So how do we do it? How do you change your self-concept to receive love? Now, since a lot of what I shared with you today is about creating safety, this is where it starts. You need to feel safe. You need to feel safe to receive. You need to feel safe with love. That requires you to do some deep nervous system work. Creating safety, increasing your capacity, creating expansion in your nervous system, that is all a foundation so that you can embody a new identity, a new self-concept. That is the basis of the work we do in Recreate Yourself. Because without it, you can do all the mindset work and you can tell yourself that you're ready, but your body is going to reject it. You're unconsciously going to brace for impact rather than open to love. But what you also need to do to change your self-concept to be receptive and open to love, you also need to do the mindset work. You need a mindset of knowing that it's safe to receive love. You need to step into the identity, into the self-concept of being someone who finds love safe, easy, smooth. That requires some mindset work, right? Keeping your brain up here in check, but it also requires some deep embodiment work. Actually feeling that to be real. It requires you to dismantle your current identity around love and the beliefs and the patterns and the shadows that are attached to that. And speaking of shadows, shadow work is really important for this too, because your subconscious is trying to protect you. And I'm not talking about the shadow work that you find on YouTube or where you find journaling prompts to reflect on. I'm talking about really deep integration and processing, right? Your shadow, those are the parts of you that you hide, that you repress, that you deny. That includes the part of you that sabotages you all the time, that sabotages the very things that you desire. So annoying. That all needs to be explored. It needs to be brought to the surface. And most importantly, it needs to be integrated. I know that's a lot. That's a big shift. That's a healing of a core pattern and a core wound. Something that you've maybe had all of your life, or at least most of your life. But there is a version of you that feels worthy of love, and there's a version of you that is ready for it now. There's a version of you that can let it in to the point that it actually shows up and it actually stays. And that version of you already exists right now, but you need to do what it takes in order to bring her to the surface. Let me know in the comments what relationship pattern you tend to experience, if you've ever noticed yourself pushing love away unconsciously. Share it below. We've all been there, I think. And then next week, we're gonna dive into the question why your reality isn't shifting even though you've been working on your self-concept, right? I know many of you are in this place where you have been feeling like you've been doing the work and for some reason you don't see any change. So tune back in next week for that, and I wish you a wonderful week.